Imagine spending your whole life trying to be liked. You adjust your voice, your smile, your thoughts. You become fluent in performance until even you forget what honesty sounds like. We're told that control is power. Control your image, your schedule, your emotions, and you'll be safe. But what if that's the real danger? What if all this effort to manage life is exactly what's keeping you from living it? Michel de Montaigne was a 16th century French nobleman with a robe, a horse, and a serious case of existential curiosity. He quit politics, locked himself in a tower filled with books and Latin quotes on the ceiling, and started writing essays about himself. No sponsors, no followers. Just a man trying to figure out why being human feels so weird. What he discovered wasn't a life hack, it was a quiet revolution. Before we begin, close your eyes. Not to vanish, but to arrive. This isn't a tutorial, it's a quiet rebellion. The invitation to live free. Let's begin. Peace doesn't come from holding on tighter, it comes from letting go. And it all starts here with the first illusion we have to bury, the myth of control. We are addicted to control. We manage schedules down to the minute. We track our steps, monitor our sleep, plan our careers, measure our moods. Every moment must be optimized, every move calculated. And yet, even in this hyper-managed life, we still feel behind. As if the more we try to master the world, the more it slips through our fingers. Michel de Montaigne had no productivity hacks, no vision board, no dopamine detox. What he had was a horse, a tower, and a near-death experience. One day, his horse threw him violently to the ground. He believed he was dying, and in that moment, no strategy, no plan, no life philosophy could save him. Later, when he recovered, he didn't build a better system. He wrote this: "There were many occasions when I prepared myself for death and then walked away untouched. And other times I feared nothing and came back bleeding." That moment shattered something in him, and he found something stronger than control: awareness. We believe control will keep us safe, that if we worry enough, plan enough, predict enough, we'll dodge life's chaos. But Montaigne saw through it. A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears. That's not philosophy, that's a daily diagnosis. You rehearse conversations in your head that never happen. You try to anticipate reactions that never come. You lose sleep over futures that will never exist. You suffer, not because the world hurt you, but because you tried to beat it to the punch. We treat life like an algorithm. If I input X effort, I'll get Y reward. But life doesn't do math, it plays jazz. You can work for years and fail, or stumble into something beautiful without trying. Montaigne didn't turn bitter from this. He didn't retreat into cynicism. He said, live. Not perfectly, not with mastery, just live. My trade and art is to live, he wrote, and carved those words into the wood of his library. And here's the twist. The more you grip, the more fragile you become. The world becomes something to fear, to manage, to fix. But when you loosen your hold, not out of laziness, but out of lucidity, something strange happens. Space returns, breath returns, you return. You're not the conductor of reality, as your old pal might say. You're the guy in the audience, gripping the program, pretending the violins are following your breathing. So maybe peace doesn't come from control. Maybe it begins where the grip ends, when you're no longer obsessed with shaping the moment, and instead, you let the moment shape you. That's where Montaigne starts. But if control is the first illusion, it's not the only one. There's another force, quieter, more seductive, that shapes how we speak, move, dress, even think. It doesn't scream, it whispers, the need to be liked. You fix your bio, delete the tweet, repost the photo. Change your tone depending on who's in the room. Not because you're fake, but because you've been trained to believe that being accepted is survival. Fitting in is no longer a social instinct, it's a full-time job. But here's the quiet tragedy. The more you try to be liked, the less you actually exist. You become a reflection, not a person. You show up as what you think people want, not as who you are. And one day, you catch your own eye in the mirror and realize you're not sure who's looking back. Michel de Montaigne knew this danger long before Instagram. In a world filled with political posturing, moral performances, and public displays of virtue, he chose something wildly unfashionable: radical self-honesty. "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself," he wrote. "Not to belong to a tribe or a party or a brand, but to yourself. And to do that, you must first risk disappointing others." That's the hard part, because approval is addictive. A compliment, a nod, a smile, we take them like hits of oxygen. And slowly, without noticing, we start building our personality around them. It's subtle. The clothes you choose, the opinions you silence, the jokes you don't tell, the dream you bury because it might seem ridiculous, until your whole life is curated for applause you barely enjoy. Montaigne didn't play that game. He didn't write essays to impress the world. He wrote to understand himself. Messy, inconsistent, imperfect. "I am myself the matter of my book," he said. "You would be unreasonable to spend your leisure on so frivolous and vain a subject." That wasn't false humility. That was freedom, to speak plainly, to contradict himself, to change his mind, to think aloud. Because the real danger isn't being disliked. It's being liked for who you're not. That's the prison. You get praise, but it's not for you. It's for the costume. And now you're stuck wearing it, even when it starts to suffocate. If your self-worth updates every time someone likes a post, you're not growing. You're buffering. To belong to yourself is not to reject others. It's to stop outsourcing your identity. It's the art of being solid in a world obsessed with shape-shifting. Montaigne wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, but he was whole. And that wholeness didn't come from admiration. It came from solitude, from silence, from daring to think in a voice not made for approval, but for truth. But presence has a cost. When you stop performing, some people walk away. When you stop editing yourself, silence gets louder. And when you finally belong to yourself, you start to see how much of your life was built to impress people who were never really watching. So what do you do next? You let go, not out of apathy, not to escape, but because you finally realize that holding on to everything is what's been holding you back. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care enough to stop clinging to control, to outcomes, to people, to your own image of how things are supposed to go. And when you release that grip, not out of weakness but out of wisdom, something strange happens. Things begin to fall into place without force. Detachment has a bad reputation. People hear the word and think of cold monks on mountaintops or nihilists pretending nothing matters. But Montaigne's version of detachment isn't about apathy. It's about clarity. It's knowing what deserves your energy and what's quietly draining it. "There is a sort of useless anxiety in struggling against inevitable things," he wrote. "That wasn't resignation. That was freedom. Because some things in life are heavy, not because they're real, but because you won't put them down. You keep checking your phone, waiting for the reply. You rehearse conversations that never happened. You carry arguments in your chest like unpaid rent, and the longer you hold on, the more you forget what lightness even feels like." Letting go isn't a loss, it's a shift from control to presence, from anxiety to movement. Montaigne wrote, "We must learn to suffer what we cannot avoid, not to collapse, but to stop exhausting ourselves trying to rearrange what is already here. You can still care, you can still love, but from a place of wholeness, not from hunger." That's the fierce piece of detachment. You stop managing other people's impressions. You stop auditioning for roles in someone else's story. You show up, raw, simple, real. And here's the paradox. The less you try to control things, the more things begin to align, not perfectly, but honestly. There's power in that. Quiet, magnetic power. Because detachment isn't about doing less, it's about doing just enough. Just enough to stay rooted, just enough to remain free. A man who follows another does not follow anything, Montaigne wrote. He seeks nothing, finds nothing. The goal isn't to escape the world, it's to stop chasing it. You'll still feel things, you'll still care, but you'll learn to notice which fires are worth feeding and which are just smoke in your lungs. Detachment doesn't kill your passion, it protects it, so it's not consumed by every little fear, opinion, or delay. So when something feels too heavy, ask yourself, is this truly mine to carry? Or have I just been holding it for too long? Sometimes peace isn't something you find, it's what's left when you stop clenching your fists. And sometimes the deepest test of detachment is love. Not the kind that traps or chases or controls, but the kind that stays even when you let it fly. Love is tricky. The moment you think you own it, it slips away. The moment you try to define it, it outgrows the shape. We've been told that love means holding tight, but Montaigne understood something deeper, something quieter. The most powerful love isn't the one that binds. It's the one that stays, even when it's free to go. We love in a transactional world. A reply means interest. A pause means rejection. A scene without a response can ruin your week. We're conditioned to measure love in responses, speed, intensity, and control. And when that control slips, we panic. We check the timestamp, reread the message, try to interpret the silence, because deep down we're scared that if love isn't tightly held, it'll vanish. But Montaigne knew better. His friendship with Etienne de la Boétie wasn't built on expectation. It wasn't a contract, it was presence, mutual recognition, a connection that didn't need proof. If I am pressed to say why I loved him, Montaigne wrote, I feel it can only be explained by replying, because it was him, because it was me. That's it. No performance, no justification, just resonance. Love like that doesn't demand, it doesn't cling, it doesn't fear the pause or the space. It trusts that what is true doesn't need to be chased, it simply is. But most of us never get there, because we're too busy managing love, editing ourselves, overthinking replies, hiding our depth, playing roles, just to keep the connection alive. But when you do that, the love that remains isn't real. It's a performance. And now you're not just afraid of losing them, you're terrified they might discover who you really are and walk away. That's not love. That's a hostage negotiation wrapped in poetry. The hardest truth, you can't hold love hostage and expect it to stay. You have to let it breathe. And if it's real, it won't run. It will return. Not because you caged it, but because you freed it. So the real art of loving is learning to hold with open hands. And the most loyal love is the one that doesn't need to be captured to be deeply felt. You don't need to be louder, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be honest, even if it trembles a little, because the world doesn't need another version of who you think you should be. It needs the version of you that's quietly, radically real. And if that voice inside says, "This makes sense," let it echo somewhere outside. Drop a comment. Tell me what you're learning to let go of. And if you want more weird wisdom from dead French guys, hit subscribe. I'll be here. Same robe, same tower.